Have you ever wondered why some relationships, despite their promise, leave you feeling drained and confused? The moments that should feel warm and certain begin to feel like walking on shifting sand. Conversations twist until you question your own memory. Your laughter feels muted, your thoughts hesitant. This is not simply miscommunication. It is the quiet erosion of your inner ground by the hands of subtle control. And the most dangerous thing about it is how invisible it can be, even to the one living inside it. The truth-teller archetype rises here, the woman who holds the lantern in the darkness. She sees the small fractures before they widen into chasms, yet even she must first pass through the fog, because manipulation is rarely a direct blow. It comes in whispers. It cloaks itself as care, as love, as concern. And when your worth is uncertain, when the foundation of self is still seeking solidity, the fog feels like home. Jung knew that the shadow hides in what feels familiar. It calls to the unhealed places within, making the hook deep and hard to see. In these dynamics, the manipulator is not always overt. Sometimes they are the charming partner who always needs the last word, or the one who turns every hurt you express into a reflection of your supposed flaws. This is projection, where they deposit their unwanted truth into you and watch you carry the weight that was never yours. The dance is ancient. In the language of the unconscious, one partner plays the role of the wounded child seeking safety through control. The other, the ever-accommodating caretaker who believes love means absorbing another's storms. The mind under this spell often tells itself that if you can just be more understanding, more patient, more forgiving, the tension will dissolve. But this is the trap. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are the scaffolding that keeps the self from collapsing under another's emotional architecture. Without them, you become an echo chamber for someone else's unresolved battles. And when your own voice grows faint, reality itself starts to bend. Gaslighting is not always a loud denial. Sometimes it is a slow reshaping of your confidence, until you ask permission to think your own thoughts. The Stoics understood that the only true sovereignty is over the self. To hold your inner calm in outer chaos is to refuse to be pulled into another's emotional orbit. But this calm does not come from passivity. It comes from clarity. It is the ability to see where you end and another begins. It is the recognition that love without self-respect is not love at all, but dependency dressed in romance. The truth-teller does not mistake sacrifice for devotion. She knows that a heart without boundaries is an open field for invasion. To begin reclaiming power in such a dynamic, one must first be willing to witness the truth without softening it. This means naming the patterns, even when they feel small. It means refusing to excuse cruelty because of a partner's pain. Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating the shadow, not by merging into another's. Individuation in love means holding space for connection without dissolving into it. It means allowing the other to carry their own burdens, even if they plead to place them in your hands. The manipulator's survival depends on blurred lines. When you step back and see clearly, the spell begins to crack. They may accuse you of being cold, selfish, unloving. This is because they mistake your boundaries for rejection. But boundaries are the most loving act you can offer to yourself and even to them. Without boundaries, you allow both of you to live in illusion. With them, you offer truth, and truth, while uncomfortable, is the only ground on which anything real can grow. Imagine the truth-teller now, her lantern steady in the night. She does not chase shadows to convince them of the light. She stands where she is, clear in her form, and lets the light reveal what it must. Those who wish to meet her in that clarity will step forward. Those who cannot will retreat into the dark. But she does not follow them. Her path is her own, and it is defined not by who walks beside her, but by the integrity of her steps. So the question becomes, if you could see, with perfect clarity, every place where your boundaries have been crossed. Would you be willing to hold them, even if it meant losing the relationship you once thought you could not live without? Some forms of control arrive like a velvet glove, soft to the touch, yet tightening around the wrist. It is not the roar of domination, but the quiet persistence of persuasion. A suggestion disguised as care. A subtle withdrawal of warmth until you agree. And each time you yield, the ground beneath you becomes less your own. The truth teller knows this is how power is taken, not in one violent strike, but in 1,000 invisible moments where your yes is shaped by fear of losing love. Jung spoke, key of the anima and animus, the feminine and masculine within us, both holding light and shadow. In a manipulative dynamic, the shadow of the masculine may show as dominance cloaked in guidance, while the shadow of the feminine may appear as submission cloaked in harmony. These shadow forms recognize each other instantly. They lock into place like ancient puzzle pieces, each confirming the other's story. The manipulator's need for control finds its mirror in the other's longing to be needed, and so the loop tightens. It is here that boundaries become not just an act of resistance, but a complete rewriting of the story. Boundaries say, "I will no longer play the role your shadow has written for me." They break the unconscious contract, yet this breaking is not easy. To stop feeding someone's control means watching their discomfort, their anger, their fear, and resisting the urge to soothe it. This is the crucible where self-respect is forged. The Stoics would say, "Hold the line within, for storms are only dangerous if you believe they can drown you." Gaslighting thrives in the absence of self-trust. If your inner compass has been tampered with long enough, you will look outside for direction, even for the right to feel what you feel. This is why reclaiming sovereignty begins with an inner audit. What thoughts feel like yours, and which ones carry the voice of someone else? Which doubts entered your mind after certain arguments, certain silences? The truth teller does not rush this process. She listens to the echo of each thought, tracing it back to its origin. There is a strange alchemy in holding a boundary for the first time. The moment you say, "This is not acceptable," your body may shake, your breath may quicken. Old patterns scream that you are risking everything. Yet on the other side of that fear is a profound stillness. The stillness of a self that knows it will not abandon itself again. Jung's individuation is felt here, not as a distant ideal, but as the living moment where you choose authenticity over approval. The manipulator often reacts to this change with escalation. They may increase charm, deepen guilt, or magnify withdrawal. All of it is designed to lure you back into the familiar script. But once you have seen the stage, the lights, the rehearsed lines, you cannot unknow them. Your task then is not to destroy the other, but to refuse the performance. The truth teller does not argue with illusion. She simply steps out of it. And in doing so, she forces reality to reveal itself. It is important to understand that boundaries are not weapons. They are vessels. They hold your energy so you are not endlessly pouring into those who have no intention of pouring back. Without them, love becomes a leaking cup, no matter how much you give. The Stoics would remind us that what you guard is not your heart from feeling, but your will from being bent. This is the essence of emotional self-preservation, not closing off, but choosing where the opening is sacred. Imagine now a woman who has lived for years bending herself into shapes to keep a relationship intact. One day, without drama, she decides the shape she will be is her own. The manipulator notices immediately. The subtle questions begin. The tests are set. Yet this time she does not enter the maze. She lets the silence stand. And in that silence, the old dynamic begins to crumble. For the first time, the power is no longer shared. It is hers alone. So the question becomes, if holding a boundary caused the entire architecture of a manipulative relationship to collapse, would you see that collapse as loss or as liberation? Some manipulative dynamics do not announce themselves with conflict at all. They arrive in the form of dependency so sweet it feels like intimacy. A partner who insists they cannot function without your constant reassurance, who claims you are the only one who truly understands them. At first, it feels flattering, proof of closeness. But slowly, this dependency becomes a tether. Your emotions must orbit theirs. Your needs become secondary to keeping their world intact. And the cost is a quiet erosion of your freedom. Jung understood this as an unconscious contract between the rescuer and the one who must be rescued. In shadow, the rescuer gains identity from being essential, while the other gains control through helplessness. Both are trapped, though in different ways. For the one being drained, the gift of constant giving becomes a chain. It is not love that keeps the bond alive. It is fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of being seen as unkind. Fear that saying no will dissolve the connection entirely. The truth-teller archetype sees through this eventually. She knows that boundaries are not a rejection of love, but the only way to preserve it. Without boundaries, what began as care becomes self-erasure. And once you are erased, the relationship is no longer with you, it is with the version of you someone else has crafted. To reclaim your form is to risk that the other will not like what they see when you stand as yourself. The Stoics remind us, the approval of another is not the measure of your worth. This is where gaslighting can take a softer, more insidious tone. The manipulator may not outright deny your feelings. Instead, they may say you are overreacting, that they never meant to burden you, that your boundaries feel like distance and distance feels like betrayal. Each phrase is designed to make you doubt whether your limits are fair at all. This doubt is the hook. It pulls you back into managing their emotions at the cost of your own. And every time you step back into that role, your own stability weakens. There is a turning point, though, when the truth-teller chooses stillness over explanation. When faced with pleas or guilt, she does not defend her boundary like a fortress under siege. She lets it stand without justification. This is the deeper lesson. A boundary does not require validation to exist. It exists because you do. Jung's path of individuation means you no longer require permission to define where you end and another begins. The moment you accept this, manipulation loses one of its strongest tools. Some will push harder when they sense the shift. They may flood you with attention or withdraw completely, hoping to provoke you into chasing. This is the emotional pendulum, control through unpredictability. Without boundaries, the pendulum keeps you in a constant state of adjustment. With them, you step out of its swing. You stop measuring your worth by how close or distant someone stands. You anchor to yourself instead. And that anchor is not pride, it is survival. The Stoics would say the power lies in recognizing that another's storms are not your duty to calm. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop trading your inner peace for temporary harmony. It means you understand that love cannot thrive in an environment where one person's needs must eclipse the other's entirely. Boundaries create space for truth to emerge, even if that truth reveals the relationship cannot sustain itself without control. Picture a woman sitting across from the one who has long relied on her to carry their emotional weight. She hears the same pleas, the same accusations, yet her answer is different this time. She says nothing. She allows the discomfort to swell, to pass, to settle. In that silence, a new reality is born. The other may rage, cry, or bargain, but she remains unmoved. Because she knows that every time she holds the line, she steps closer to a life where love is not payment for self-abandonment. So the question becomes, if the only way to keep a relationship alive is to keep sacrificing yourself, is it truly a relationship worth keeping at all? Some manipulation hides inside the language of unity, phrases like "we're a team" or "we're in this together." They sound noble, but in certain mouths, they become tools to erase individuality. Every decision is framed as mutual, yet somehow always aligns with one person's will. Every dissent is painted as disloyalty. It is a quiet conversion of partnership into submission, built on the illusion that harmony must mean agreement at all costs. Jung would see this as the collective shadow at work within a relationship. The manipulator plays the role of the unchallenged leader, and the other becomes the willing subject, until the subject begins to notice the cost. The truth-teller archetype senses the shift when together starts to feel like a cage. She understands that true unity is not the merging of two into one, but the coexistence of two sovereign selves. Without that sovereignty, love becomes indistinguishable from control. Gaslighting in these dynamics is often wrapped in affection. The manipulator may say, "I just want what's best for us," while undermining your perspective. They may insist they are protecting you, when in reality they are protecting their authority over you. It is a subtle corrosion of your confidence in your own choices. Over time, you might stop voicing them altogether, mistaking compliance for peace. But peace built on silence is a fragile peace. It shatters the moment you speak again. Boundaries in this terrain are not declarations of war. They are declarations of self. The Stoics would call it the mastery of what is within your control, your choices, your values, your voice. The truth-teller does not set a boundary to provoke, but to preserve. She does not need to prove the unfairness of the dynamic. She only needs to live outside of it. And in doing so, she forces the relationship to reveal whether it can survive her authenticity. There is a particular kind of strength required to hold a boundary when the other person frames it as betrayal. This strength is not hard and brittle. It is rooted and steady. It allows the accusation to pass through without breaking the resolve. Jung's individuation is felt here as the courage to disappoint someone in order to remain true to oneself. It is the quiet knowing that self-betrayal is the greater wound. When boundaries enter such a relationship, the manipulator's strategies often shift. They may suddenly become more agreeable, even indulgent, to lure you back into the old rhythm. Or they may withdraw completely, creating the void they know you fear. This is the pendulum again, but now you see the arc of its swing. You no longer need to chase one extreme to escape the other. You step off entirely and watch it pass by without pulling you along. The danger here is nostalgia. The mind may romanticize the closeness you once felt before the boundaries were drawn. But that closeness was not built on mutual respect. It was built on your compliance. The truth-teller reminds herself of this when the old pull returns. She knows the difference between connection and control, between intimacy and possession. And she chooses connection, even if it means seeking it elsewhere. Imagine her now, standing at the threshold of the life she has known. Behind her, the familiar comfort of shared identity. Ahead, the uncertainty of walking alone. Yet she steps forward because she understands that the only relationships worth keeping are those where her sovereignty remains intact. This is the quiet rebellion, to exist fully as oneself in a world that rewards compliance. So the question becomes, if someone only values your presence when you agree with them, do they truly value you at all? Some manipulation does not come through words at all. It comes through the orchestration of atmosphere, a slammed door instead of a conversation, a long silence that says more than any accusation, the shift in tone at dinner that makes you question what you've done wrong. This is control through emotional climate, the unspoken rules you must obey to avoid tension. Soon, you find yourself navigating not the relationship, but the weather inside it. Jung would name this as the shadow's silent language. The manipulator need not state their will. Their moods become the law. And if you are attuned to harmony, you may adjust yourself without even being asked. This is the quiet training of your nervous system to anticipate and preempt another's storms. Over time, you mistake this hyperattunement for love. But love should not feel like surveillance of another's emotions. It should not require the constant shrinking of your own presence. Gaslighting here is not always verbal. It can be the denial of atmosphere itself. When you name the tension, they dismiss it as your imagination. When you point out the withdrawal, they call it your insecurity. The goal is not just to control your actions, it is to rewrite your perception of reality. If they can make you doubt the weather you feel on your own skin, they can make you doubt anything. And in that doubt, control becomes effortless. Boundaries in this space are acts of grounding. The Stoics would say they are the decision to stand in your own climate, no matter the storms around you. It begins with refusing to respond to unspoken manipulation, to let the slammed door be theirs, not yours, to allow the silence to belong to them without filling it in fear. This is not coldness, it is the reclaiming of your emotional atmosphere. Without it, you live in a constant state of reactive adjustment, never in your own steadiness. The truth-teller archetype walks here with a steady lantern. She observes the weather without becoming it. She can feel the chill, but she does not shiver to please. This unnerves the manipulator because it removes the leverage of mood. Without the ability to shape your state from the outside, they must face themselves. And that is the one confrontation many will go to great lengths to avoid. There is a shift that happens when you stop managing someone's climate. At first, the storms may grow louder. The silences may deepen. They may accuse you of being detached, unfeeling. But the more you hold your own ground, the more you realize that their atmosphere was never yours to fix. This is the heart of individuation, knowing where you end and letting that ending be firm. Jung's path was never about eliminating conflict, but about aligning with the truth of your own being. The danger in this stage is the temptation to prove your point, to gather evidence of the manipulation and lay it before them. But the truth-teller knows this rarely works. Those who rely on control often deny it most fiercely. The power lies not in convincing them, but in removing the leverage they hold. To stop reacting is to stop feeding the dynamic. And when the dynamic starves, its true nature reveals itself. Picture her now in a shared space where the air is thick with unspoken disapproval. She feels it, names it silently to herself, and continues in her own rhythm. The manipulator waits for her to bend, to ask what's wrong, to apologize for a crime she never committed. She does not. And in that absence of reaction, she breaks the pattern that once defined the relationship. The weather belongs to them now entirely, and she walks in her own season. So the question becomes, if you stopped adjusting yourself to avoid another's storms, what parts of your life would finally feel like your own? Some manipulation hides behind generosity. Gifts appear at the exact moment you start to pull away. Offers of help arrive when you assert a boundary. Compliments are sprinkled in just enough to soften the sting of control. This is not kindness without agenda. It is the transactional giving that keeps you indebted. The unspoken contract is clear. Gratitude must be paid in compliance. And if you refuse, the generosity dries up, revealing the control it always concealed. Jung might see this as the shadow dressed in virtue. The manipulator cloaks their will in acts that appear selfless, yet serve only to bind the other. The truth-teller archetype learns to see past the glitter of these offerings. She knows that true giving has no strings, and that anything which demands a certain behavior in return is not a gift, but a bargain. This clarity is unsettling to those who rely on such tactics, because it dismantles the illusion of their goodness. Gaslighting in this pattern often takes the form of moral inversion. If you reject the gift, you are ungrateful. If you question the timing, you are suspicious. If you accept but still hold your boundary, you are accused of taking without giving back. The manipulator positions themselves as the virtuous one, casting you as selfish for not rewarding their kindness with submission. This is not generosity, it is leverage. And leverage, when hidden beneath affection, is among the most dangerous forms of control. The Stoics would say the key here is to master your relationship to external rewards. If your peace depends on the approval or favor of another, you will always be vulnerable to their conditions. The truth teller sets boundaries not only around what she will tolerate, but around what she will receive. She accepts only what does not come with invisible chains. This is how she protects both her dignity and her freedom. Breaking this pattern means being willing to lose what was never freely given. It means declining offers when they are tied to control, even if it costs you comfort or convenience. The first refusals may feel like betrayal, not just to them, but to the part of yourself conditioned to equate receiving with owing. Yet each time you choose autonomy over obligation, you loosen the knot of their influence. Jung's individuation is present here in the ability to discern between the outer form of a thing and its inner truth. When generosity is used as manipulation, boundaries can feel like ingratitude. This is why many never set them. They fear being seen as unkind. But kindness without self-respect is a hollow virtue. The truth teller knows that protecting herself does not diminish her capacity for love. It preserves it for those who will not use it as currency. In this, she aligns with the Stoic ideal, acting from principle, not from fear of losing favor. Imagine her now being offered something she once would have accepted without hesitation. She sees the strings before they are pulled. Her answer is gentle but firm, no. There is surprise, perhaps even anger. The withdrawal comes quickly, yet she remains steady, unmoved by the absence of what was never truly hers to keep. In that moment, she is free, not because she received, but because she refused. So the question becomes, if you stopped accepting anything that came with invisible strings, how much lighter would your life become? Some manipulation is born not from force, but from the slow shaping of your identity. It begins with subtle suggestions about who you are, repeated often enough that they feel like truth. You're too sensitive. You're not good with decisions. You'd be lost without me. These phrases slip under the skin until they are no longer heard, they are believed. And once you believe them, your boundaries weaken because you doubt you have the right or ability to hold them. Jung would call this the shadow's work upon the ego, an unconscious molding of another's self-image to serve the controller's needs. The manipulator does not just seek to influence what you do, they seek to define who you are. The truth teller archetype learns to recognize this by tracing the origin of her self-beliefs. She asks, did this truth come from my own experience, or was it planted in me? In that questioning, she begins to reclaim authorship of her identity. Gaslighting here is woven directly into the rewriting of the self. If you challenge the label they've given you, they insist they are only being honest. If you resist their definition, they accuse you of denial. Over time, this creates a double bind. Agree, and you shrink into their version of you. Disagree, and you are told you're proving them right by being difficult. This trap is not about disagreement, it's about eroding the ground on which disagreement could stand. The Stoics would see the escape as a return to what is within your control, your judgment. To know yourself on your own terms is to stand on unshakable ground, no matter who tries to name you otherwise. The truth teller refuses to outsource her identity, for she understands that any self built from another's narrative can be dismantled by them at will. Her boundaries begin here, not around her time or her space, but around the very definition of who she is. Breaking free from identity-shaping manipulation often feels like betrayal to the one who shaped you. They may remind you of all the times they helped you become the person you are, framing your self-reclamation as ingratitude. But true gratitude does not require surrender. The truth teller can honor the influence of another without allowing it to dictate her form. This is the essence of individuation, separating what is authentically yours from what was imposed. At first, holding this kind of boundary feels strange. You may hesitate before speaking in your own voice, wondering if it will be criticized. You may feel the urge to soften your stance to avoid confirming their labels. But the more you live from your own definition, the less weight those old narratives hold. Their words lose the power to wound because they no longer match the person you've claimed yourself to be. Picture her now, hearing once again the familiar label meant to keep her small. Instead of defending, she lets it fall like rain against stone. No argument, no explanation. The silence is not submission, it is refusal. She knows the self she carries inside is not up for debate. In that moment, the manipulator's grasp slips because the tether they once held is now anchored firmly in her own hands. So the question becomes, if you no longer accepted anyone else's definition of who you are, how much more freely would you live? Some manipulation is not about taking from you directly, but about keeping you in a constant state of proving yourself. Approval is given sparingly, like water in a drought, so you work harder, bend further, just to taste it again. The praise comes when you meet their unspoken conditions and disappears when you step outside them. This is control through conditional validation, training you to earn your worth in their eyes. Jung might see this as the shadow's use of archetypal hunger, the deep human need to be seen and valued, turned into a leash. The manipulator learns what you crave to hear, then controls when and how you hear it. The truth-teller archetype understands that while recognition can be nourishing, it becomes toxic when it is rationed for control. Her liberation begins with recognizing the pattern, the cycle of hope, effort, and momentary reward that keeps her bound. Gaslighting here is subtle. They may insist they are simply honest, or that their high standards are for your own good. When you notice the unevenness of their praise, they tell you it's all in your head. Yet your body knows the truth. You tense when you don't receive it. You relax when you do. This physiological tether is what makes the pattern so powerful. It bypasses reason and binds you through craving. The Stoics would say the antidote is self-sufficiency and esteem. To anchor your value in your own assessment is to step out of their cycle entirely. The truth teller does this by giving herself the acknowledgement she once chased. She celebrates her own progress, her own integrity, without waiting for permission to feel proud. Boundaries in this space are internal, refusing to perform for crumbs of approval and instead acting from principle. Breaking free often means facing a deep emptiness at first. When you stop seeking their validation, the absence of praise feels like a loss. But this is only the withdrawal from a false source. In its place, you begin to hear a quieter, steadier voice, your own. Over time, it grows louder than theirs, and no amount of withheld approval can touch you. This is individuation in practice, to choose the truth of the self over the lure of external reward. The manipulator may react with confusion, then escalation. They may suddenly shower you with the very praise they once withheld, hoping to pull you back into the cycle. But the truth teller receives it differently now. She can appreciate kind words without being owned by them. She knows that her worth was never up for negotiation, and that approval freely given is a gift, not a chain. Imagine her standing in the same room where she once measured her every word for fear of disapproval. She speaks as she chooses. The praise does not come. She feels the space where it would have landed and realizes she is still whole. No part of her has been lost in the absence. In fact, she feels larger, as if her voice has more room to expand. So the question becomes, if you stopped performing for someone else's approval entirely, what truths would you finally feel free to SB? Leak.